Hi boys and girls, it's Mrs. Paddock. I have a book that goes with our lesson on vermicomposting. Remember, that means it's when worms break down organic material. And so I hope you enjoy this story. It's called Wiggling Worms at Work. Wiggling Worms at Work. Hope you learn a thing or two. Down in the ground, under your feet, thousands of worms wiggle around flower bulbs and tunnel under trees. They twist and turn, eating almost anything in their way. These wiggling worms are at work. Farmers plow their fields to loosen the soil. Crumbly soil lets the roots of plants spread out and grow. Worms also loosen the soil as they wiggle along. They are called nature's plows. As worms twist and turn, they push aside loose soil. This creates tunnels. Air flows along these tunnels. Rainwater trickles down. Roots drink it up. Moist ground helps plants grow better. Worms tunnel in hard-packed soil by swallowing it. The soil goes in the worm's mouth, slides into the crop, then passes down to the gizzard. Worms do not have teeth. Muscles, fine grains of sand, and small stones in the gizzard grind the soil. Worms digest leaf and plant bits that are found in soil just as you digest a salad. What's left passes through the worm's body and comes out its tail end in the form of pellets called worm castings. These castings make good plant food. They help fruits and vegetables grow bigger and better. Sometimes worms crawl above ground. When they tunnel back down into the ground, they pull dead leaves and plants down with them. These plants make the soil better as they rot. Seeds come down too, and some of these seeds send out roots. Seedlings will sprout, and worms help the new plants to begin to grow. So you can see one growing here, right? Worms can wiggle, twist, turn, and even tie themselves in knots because they have no backbones. Their soft bodies are made up of rings or segments, and these segments act like coils on a slinky toy. They let the worm bend. A worm has no legs, but 8 bristles under each segment, and they act like legs. They help a worm to move. Strong muscles allow the worm to stretch out its front end. It becomes long and thin. Then the worm fastens its front bristles to the soil. The back end slinks up, making the worm short and fat. The worm wiggles along, stretching and slinking, stretching and slinking. With all its wiggling, twisting, and turning, it's a wonder that a worm knows where it's headed. It has no eyes, it has no nose, it has no ears, and it hardly has even a brain. But a worm knows what's happening nearby. It feels vibrations on the ground, and it senses that there's a hungry robin nearby. Quickly, the worm slips back into its burrow. Hiding is the only way that it can protect itself from its enemies. And of course, birds are a worm's enemy, right? Worms also hide from the sun. They must live in damp soil since they breathe air through their moist skin. In the hot sun, their skin will dry up and then they can't breathe. Sometimes worms crawl to the surface to find food. They select dead and decaying plants to drag back to their burrows. These plants contain bacteria that worms eat. Healthy plants do not. Worms pick leaves with pointed ends rather than rounded ones. Nobody knows why. Worms also eat fungi and mold. They slurp the hair-like strands of mold the same way that you might slurp strands of spaghetti. Worms eat at the entrance of their burrows. Then each worm covers any leftover plants with its castings. Remember, that's its worm poop. This pile of worm castings is called a midden. It hides the top of the worm's burrow, and it acts like a door to keep out bad weather and rain. So it kind of made its own little door here, right? In spring, before the weather warms, worms wiggle to the surface to mate. Worms are different from most other animals. Each worm is both a male and a female, but each one still needs a mate. After mating, each worm will crawl back into its burrow. When the weather cools, a ring-like cocoon forms near the head of each worm that is mated. Slowly, the worm begins to move backwards. The cocoon inches forward on the worm's body, just as a ring on your finger would move. The cocoon passes over openings in the worm's body. Up to 30 eggs slip out of the openings and into the cocoon. In a few minutes, the cocoon slips off the worm's head, just as the ring would slip off your finger. The ends of the cocoon close, and inside the cocoon, the eggs are fertilized. So there's the cocoon. In about 3 weeks, the eggs will hatch. And out of about 30 eggs, only 3 or 4 wormlets will emerge from each cocoon. So 3 or 4 of them will come out. They look like tiny pieces of cotton thread, less than an inch long, but they're fully developed worms and they live completely on their own. They do not need their parents' help. The wormlets inch along, finding bits of dead plants to eat, dragging them to their tunnels and covering any leftovers with their castings. They wiggle underground, loosening the soil and making tunnels. Even tiny wormlets help the soil. These babies, they grow fast, and in about 6 weeks, they are adult worms. In winter, the soil near the surface freezes. The worms plug up their tunnels and move down where the soil is warmer. They stay there until spring, and then they wiggle up, tunneling and twisting and turning until they're right under your feet again. Vegetables and flowers grow better. Trees grow bigger. Grass grows greener because there are thousands of wiggling worms at work. And there we have it. That's a little story about worms at work. And I hope that you watch my vermicomposting lesson. Frankie and Johnny and I had a great time doing that. We got to harvest the castings, which of course is the worm poop. And we had a good time doing that because of course we had to separate the worms from the poop. And then all that poop got put into my garden. And so that's gonna help my vegetables and my flowers to grow really well. And then of course those worms that were in the box went back into the box and we started the compost bin all over again. So it's like a cycle, right? And I hope you enjoyed that. And maybe you'll get to do something like that, do some vermicomposting at your place as well. Dylan, I think that would be a great project for you because I know that you're interested in worms. That's it, my friends. I hope you have a great day and I love you and I miss you all. Take care. See you soon.